there, Pepper Pots, how are you doing? This is going to be a special video for me to make because I'm going to be walking you through quite a lot of a couple of my previous books of mirrors. I have been reading through my old books lately, my old journals, my old poetry, and I have been wanting to dig into these two particular books of mirrors for a while now. And I thought, you know what, why not make a Rambling Witch episode about it? Why not talk a little bit about things I've put in my books of mirrors over the course of time, you know, why it was helpful to explore those things, maybe even if I come across some things that I'm surprised by or that I don't remember from my practice, then I can shoot the shit about that as well. So I'm going to take you guys along for the ride with two of my spiritual or witchy journals. Books of mirrors are different from books of shadows. For the most part, we kind of give them different purposes. So books of mirrors are more like where you do your spiritual journaling. You're journaling about how you feel about how you're getting on in your craft, difficulties that you're having, situations that have arisen. And then the Book of Shadows is usually seen to be something that is more official, where you might put the spells and rituals that you've performed and the results, or, you know, your philosophy, your witchy framework that you use, things like that. So the Book of Mirrors is usually, I think, more scrappy, and it's more just about recording what's going on in your experience, in your journey as a witch. And it's a place to vent, and it's a place to get clear about things. My witchy journaling tends to go in fits and starts, to be honest with you. Sometimes I need to be writing a lot. I'm going through quite an intense spiritual time, and there's a lot of things to write about. There's updates and stuff, and it helps me to explore things through the written word. Other times I leave my Book of Mirrors and I don't write much in there at all, and I might leave it for a few weeks. So I'm certainly not a really avid spiritual journaler. There are definitely some gaps in these two books. This one I actually started in 2011 when I was just coming back to the path. My return to the path after loving it in my teens and really being so committed to it from the age of 12 really, and then falling away from it, having a lot of difficult experiences in my late teens and early 20s and stuff. My return to the path was very tentative. I wasn't sure, and starting this book was probably me dipping my toes in. I think there were a number of ways in which I dipped my toes back into the craft and into tarot as well, because tarot is also something I was super passionate about as a kid and a teenager, and then I fell away from it a bit, and wanting to come back to it again, I was testing the waters basically with all of this kind of stuff. So the first entries in here are from 2011, and then there is a bit of a break. Oh, there's quite a bit from 2011. I didn't duck out too quickly. Bit of a break until mid-2012, where I come in strong with some writing about shadow work, which will be interesting to go into. Lots of my theories on shadow work. And then I go through 2012. And then, yeah, 2013 and 2014, I would say there's quite a lot from there. So we're all the way to like, well, I left some paper at the end, so it's like that much from that phase. So lots for me to look at. It's going to be pretty interesting. This one was the next one, so I started this in 2015, late 2015, and finished in late 2016. So let's see what we can see. Oh, this is nice, this tree in the front with the stars. It's really beautiful. Okay, so I begin with a postcard of Einstein, like you do, and a quote which I presume is from Einstein that says, "I believe in Spinoza's God." So straight away, right off the bat, I am professing that I am a pantheist, and I've had that discovery, and I want to note that down. I'm not really massively keen on writing reams and reams about my personal theological beliefs and stuff like that. So this was probably a short and sweet way to say, you know, I am a pantheist, and that's something that I have discovered. So, and there's other pantheist stuff in here. Deus sive natura, or however you pronounce it in the Latin. I believe that means God is the same as nature. And then I've also got here, there is no difference between the creator and the creation. So very big pantheist vibes right out of the box. So this was at a time in 2011 where I was really coming to a sense of what I believe about stuff. And I've always recognized really that I was an atheist. I've never described myself as an atheist. I have always just described myself as an agnostic, and I came to paganism and witchcraft really young, and that, you know, it made a lot of sense to me, but I don't think I pressured myself to go into the ins and outs of what I really believed. So when I arrived at Pantheism and I got very excited about it and I started reading more about it, I was very enthusiastic because I don't think I'd ever really figured out where I fit before. And I wasn't losing sleep over it, but it was definitely an exhilarating thing to realise that I was a pantheist. And in fact, some of the earliest videos I did on the channel were the Pantheism series. And yeah, so you can see really my passion for pantheism and this discovery that I was a pantheist very early on in the existence of the channel. And obviously straight away I wanted to like make that known in this book. It's really interesting to look back through former books of mirrors and see my designs for rituals, my brainstorming, what I thought I might want to do, and that kind of thing. I'm looking at my planning for an autumn equinox ritual right here. And it's very regimented compared to what I would do now. I think I'd have a lot more fun with it now, and I would leave a lot more to the imagination now. I believe in letting unscripted things happen in sacred space. So I might have a rough idea of what it is I want to do, what the separate bits of the ritual might be, or what I want to achieve, but I'm not going to have everything super planned out like this. So here I've got different subheadings for everything: preparation, plan for ritual, order of business, way to cast the circle, visualization, the equinox dedication, and the address to hell, and the offering to hell, rune work, intentions and thoughts, thanking hell, and closing the circle. So I've gone into it a lot. It's a lot. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides of paper to plan the ritual. Now, just for clarity, this autumn equinox ritual is when I actually dedicated myself to hell. So there's a little bit more planning that's gone into it than would be usual anyway, because it's a really big deal. It was a really big deal for me. But still, it's a lot of planning. I've written exactly what I'm going to say to hell in my address to hell. It's very beautiful, actually. It goes on a bit, Jesus. But that's appropriate. It's always appropriate to write long reams of poetic, gorgeous stuff to hell. Yeah, this is really interesting to see. There's an entry in here about doing rune work with a witchy friend of mine, which is really interesting because I am very solitary in my practice. But yeah, we were doing some rune work together about some stuff, so I forgot all about that. This is quite a funny opening line for these contemplations. It's called a path, but does it actually lead anywhere? It sounds like I'm being catty, but I'm not being catty. I'm basically just saying that for me, there is no destination that I expect to reach. I don't want the path to be at an end before I die, because I want spirituality to factor into the whole of my life, and I never want to stop learning. The final destination is death. Here I'm doing some writing about environmentalism and our responsibility to the earth, and how that can factor into my practice when I don't really, at that point in my practice anyway, I was much more interested in archetypes and mythology. I wasn't really focusing on elements in the natural world and stuff like that. I focus on it a lot more now. This was at a point where I think I was being a bit edgelordy, to be honest, at this point in my path, because I was a pantheist, but I was very against naturalistic pantheism. Well, I wasn't against it, but I was like, I didn't vibe with it at all. I was more of I described myself as a mystical pantheist, or I don't know, like I had a different take on it. And I think I was pushing back against the idea that all paganism is nature-based religion that is focused on nature and the earth and this reality. And I don't know, I think there was something about it that I was playing with it. It wasn't a really strong conviction, but in any event, yeah, this is quite a lot of writing about that, basically, about how plastic and carbon monoxide is also natural. I'm playing with this idea of good nature and bad nature, and how it doesn't make any sense to me, but it all lines up for me now anyway. But obviously I had to have these explorations. There's quite a bit of writing in this Book of Mirrors about how disappointed I am that I moved away from the witchy path, and how much time I feel I'd lost, because there was a time in my life when I was younger when it was really important for me and it meant a lot to me, and then there was this big hunk of time where I didn't really focus on it. But now looking back, I know that I wouldn't have been able to focus on it, appropriately and beneficially at that point in my life. I had to leave it behind. There was no choice. I had so much other shit going on that I had to focus on. It was never going to be the case that I was going to be able to practice witchcraft the whole time. But I think when you come back to something, it was the same with tarot. When I came back to it, after a long time of not picking it up, and I had to relearn it, which was an exhilarating experience, but was also frustrating because I used to know the meanings of the cards quite well before. There was this regret that I had moved away from it. But I think you feel that for a time, and then you realise, and I realised quite quickly, that like I needed those breaks, and tarot and witchcraft and stuff, it wouldn't have been right for me at that point in my life. Or let's just say I wouldn't have even had the room for it at that point in my life. I'm really having a word with myself at this point in my Book of Mirrors about how I can do effective ritual as a pantheist, and how you can be a pantheist who places your focus on certain things in a venerating way without worshipping them or thinking of them as Godhead. And that's a lot of stuff that I've now worked out, but at the time it was troublesome to me. So I've now reached the point where I'm writing a lot about shadow work, and this was at a time in my life in 2012 where shadow work had done so much for me and been so beneficial, and it's when I put my first videos on the channel about shadow work too. I'm actually writing for quite a few pages about different things that I think could help people to do shadow work. Some of the things helped me, and some of them I'm being more inventive with. I'm imagining various situations where shadow work could be useful, and I'm thinking about exercises that could be useful. There's a quote in here by George Bernard Shaw: "If you cannot get rid of the family skeleton, you might as well dance with it." That's a good one. Ooh, there's an entry here that's about how I want to start collecting a few more crystals. I had crystals that came my way when I was younger from family members and stuff, and one that I got when I was young. I got a couple when I was young when we would go to like Natural History Museum and stuff. But here I'm saying that I want to get more into understanding the properties of crystals and sort of getting a bigger collection of them. I have got a reasonably good collection now of small crystal pieces and palm stones and stuff. I don't collect them anymore. I don't buy them anymore because I don't need to. And with all of the questions about ethics around, you know, where crystals are mined and how they're mined and stuff like that, and with a lot of muddiness around where your crystals come from and whatever, who's affected and how the planet is affected, I just feel like I'm lucky in a way that I started a crystal collection when I did, and I've got what I need now, and it's really not important for me to have anything else, because I do love working with crystals. And if you've ever had a reading with me, you will know that I talk you through the crystals I'm using. I let you know what I'm using. I think in a way I'm just lucky, if that doesn't sound fucked up. I'm lucky that I started a crystal collection before I'd questioned, you know, the ethical stuff, because now I've got what I need. I don't need to continue buying them. And I can make a responsible decision from the point of view of somebody who has a crystal collection. And I'm lucky for that, because I do love working with crystals. If you've ever had a video reading with me, you will know that I always go through and take you through the stones that I'm using for the reading and why I'm using them and what they mean. And I like having that option. So, but I'm not actively collecting crystals anymore. I did learn a lot about their properties though. I don't think I actually wrote anything down in here. I didn't use it for my study of crystal properties and stuff. I just, I had a crystal Bible and a couple of other books, and I would just memorize things. You know, I'd go through my crystal collection and memorize. And of course, I also got a lot of hits as to what things mean to me and how I use crystals as I was going along and working with them. But I definitely geeked out over the more official metaphysical meanings of them, and I learned all of that. A list of rituals that I want to consider trying: a funeral for fear, heart healing ritual, devotional for ancestors. That's an interesting one. I think that's a bit of an affectation because I've never worked with my ancestors, and I need to talk more about that in another video. Yeah, mind shifting, gestalt work, physical healing, which was something that that was interesting for me with my chronic pain and everything. Magic and ritual definitely factored into my healing journey. It's amazing how early I start my planning for my Samhain ritual. The first notes for Samhain 2012 were written in August. So at the beginning of August, I'm already like, right, here's what we need for Samhain. Here are the notes I wrote about what I wanted to focus on and achieve for Samhain 2012. It says here: rest, slow down, take stock, reassess, hibernate, find stability and strengthen spiritual roots. Make time to remember the past and assess the year as it's unfolded. October should introduce a month of shadow work to focus on all the uncomfortable and painful events. Wow, that's a bit heavy. All the uncomfortable and painful events. Honour the dead, ancestors and heritage. Commune with the energy of death. Again, I don't remember ever honouring heritage is different to ancestors, actually. A heritage, yes. Ancestry, no. So I'm not sure whether or not that's something I wanted so much to be able to factor in. And I do think there's a pressure for people to factor it in who perhaps can't. And again, I need to do a video on this. What else did I write? Slip out of the confines of time and explore the inner world and other realms. Be open to guidance beyond the limiting perception of rational reality. Embrace the natural healing power of regeneration in the dark. Attempt to connect with the dark. Do battle with overactive imagination. The dark is your mother. Oh yeah, this was during the time where I was adamant that I had to stop being afraid of the dark. And I was going to do everything in my power to stop being afraid of the dark. Frankly, probably because I really didn't think it was that fucking witchy to be afraid of the dark. Unfortunately, I never achieved this. I am still afraid of the dark. Here I'm doing some journaling about silence and figuring out how important it is to me to be silent about what I do, what the results are, what my beliefs are. And I think this is very much linked into having a YouTube channel, particularly in the early stages. I was obviously trying to navigate for myself how much is too much and what do I want to actually reveal. Witchcraft is misunderstood, attacked and sidelined, glamorized and demonized, neither of which are entirely useful. Talking about our beliefs openly can affirm our positions to ourselves and each other. We're holding mirrors up to each other. But perhaps there's a difference between exposing our orthodoxy and exposing our orthopraxy. The orthopraxy is your personal dance with the craft, and that seems more like the kind of thing I personally would want to be silent about. So I think what I basically concluded there is that talking about your beliefs and your identity as a witch is okay, but maybe talking too much about what you actually do is not helpful. I'm not sure how I feel about that now, to be honest. I have had a handful of people over the course of time asking me to please do a ritual to camera or take the camera into sacred space and do a spell working on camera, and that's always been a bridge too far for me. That's not something I want to do. I feel like that's my sacred thing and I don't want to take anybody in with me. Here I think I'm having a little bit of a bitch about my inability to maintain self-discipline. I think a lot of witches have this kind of issue. There's a lot of writing in my Book of Mirrors at this time about the inability to maintain self-discipline, or the desire to just like extend it more, and also to observe the growth in my sense of discipline. But I look back now and I do wonder if I was pushing myself too hard, expecting myself to study something witchy every day and just constantly be expanding, and it's like, that's not realistic, basically. Oh, here I've got the meanings and the symbols for to will, to know, to dare, to be silent and to go, which I really like that. So that's cool. That's when I first learned that, probably. This entry is so annoying. It's the most annoying entry in the whole book. What? It says, I've realised something vital, undeniable and completely incredible, and even though it's been on the periphery for a while now, it's only risen to the surface in the past 24 hours, and it's already as clear as the light of day. What is it? That's all I wrote. That's the end of the entry. But as Odin once said, what you and you alone know is always the most potent, and I suppose if you don't even fucking know what you're supposed to know, it must be really fucking punchy. I'm sure it was important at the time, darlings. I'm sure it was important at the time. I think I have this tendency, and I think I've always had this, to clutter everything up and then get frustrated and say, I need things to be simple, I need things to be less cluttered. And I think it's just, you know, it's this urge towards not feeling like I'm drowning in all the different things I'm trying to learn or all the different things I'm enthusiastic about. And that's something that a few entries in this book are about. It's just like, I need to simplify everything. There's too much going on. There's too many different focus areas. There's too much on the altar. And it's just, it never lasts. I'm a maximalist, okay? I'm never going to be a minimalist. I always want more, and there's so much that reflects me, and there's so much that's good for me, and I want to drink of it all. But there's just these occasional entries in this book where it's like, and now I need to sweep everything aside, and I need to just have this one thing that I focus on. And it's such a funny little impulse that I keep thinking is very important and it's going to last, and it never does. But nowadays in my path, when I feel that need for simplicity, I just honour it, knowing that it's not going to last, but it's what I need for right at that moment. Oh, I've got some notes in here for a video. That's a bit different. This is a video response to Annika. What kind of witch are you? And I actually wrote the notes in here. Okay, January 2013, things are starting to go a lot more chaos magic-y. Oh my God, I literally think that I am the fucking second coming of Crowley. Listen to this. This is a dedication The rest of this Book of Mirrors will be given up to various explorations of astral travel, dark and left-hand ritual, chaos, discordianism, entheogenic exploration, and wild experimentation. I highly doubt that the rest of the book was given up to that. Some of it was, no doubt, but a lot of it wasn't. It was probably me with my garden variety stresses and worries about the craft and little breakthroughs here and there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think I was feeling very high-minded at this moment in time. I was like, that's it. I'm like leveling up, damn it. Oh, this is when I started using Cross of Light from Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine. I've actually written out the instructions and the words for what you've got to say to do a Cross of Light. Plans for the creation of a servitor. This is like really early in my explorations of this, so this is really exciting to see. There's not many plans for them really. I haven't really got my own ideas yet. I'm mostly just saying follow Hine's guidelines in Condensed Chaos. Done. My own ideas about how to do it and how it's helpful and whatnot is way more fleshed out now. I've gotten back from the summer solstice at Stonehenge and I'm just writing about what a wonderful life-affirming experience it was. More writing about chaos magic and just really getting excited about what I'm reading about it, which is really awesome. Some readings for myself. This is more when I started to do like in-depth readings for myself and writing down the guidance and referring back to it and stuff. It's nice to see some of my affectionate writing about Shiva and the divine masculine in here. Really just exploring that from a very like open, freshly new perspective. So it's nice to look at these. You know what, looking back, I don't think I actually realised how much Shiva came into my life at a certain point. And I was really interested in connecting more with him. But at the same time is when I really hooked up a lot with Tyr from the Norse pantheon. I know that's not how you pronounce it, but I cannot bear to put on the accent and pronounce it properly because it just sounds so fake. Yeah, like... It's interesting, there's just a lot of divine masculine stuff coming up here. And it's interesting, isn't it, how when you reflect on what you wrote in your books of mirrors, you didn't realise how important something was to you at the time. Maybe when you think of it in hindsight, before you've read back, you think it was just a very small thing, but actually if there's a lot of writing about it, you're like, oh, this really was significant to me, I really cared about this. So moving into January 2014, I am playing around with poppets, which is interesting. And there's a really interesting entry here about the fact that the Virgin Mary and Satan have both been of interest to me. So the same time that I wanted to connect more with Mary, I was like, oh yeah, and Satan, which is really intriguing. It's like, yes, the mother of God and the archenemy of God, absolutely. Okay, let's take a look at the other one. This one hasn't got as much in it because I didn't go all the way to the end. I wanted to start a new one because I was just in a really new place with my path, so I didn't finish this. So yeah, let's have a little look through it anyway. Oh, Birth of a New Altar is the first entry here. So I'm really playing with the arrangement of my altar and I'm writing about that. Very early in this book is where I start to mention that I can feel my practice going in more of a divine feminine or goddess oriented direction. And I think at the time and still now, I didn't feel that it took anything away from the experiences that I'd had with the divine masculine or the experiences I'd had away from that paradigm entirely, of which there have also been a lot. I certainly don't heavily lean on the divine feminine, divine masculine thing at all, but for me, it was very healing to go through that exploration. And to me, there was something really significant about it for a bunch of reasons. But yeah, this is where I actually acknowledge, like, okay, it's going to be pretty goddessy from here on in. Like, that's going to be something that inspires me and it's going to be something I want to look into more. I finally consecrated my new altar space entirely tonight and I worked at it for the first time. The energies are amazing. I consecrated my new cauldron with the blade over shield oil and dedicated it to the Dark Mother. I called her energies to me, opening myself up to signs, symbols, messages and meetings, but also just calling her discipline, focus and power into me so that I can do what needs to be done in the weeks ahead. I'm definitely on the goddess gravy train now then. Having a little gripe about missing a particular moon phase on which I wanted to do some ritual and magic, but things didn't work out. I think there's probably a lot of that in Witchy's Books of Mirrors, just bitching. Oh, so this is the part in the book where I do start to write a lot more sort of like random poetic things, or, you know, several sentences or whatever about hell or about Mary. This says, "Blessed is the dark mother who whispers her words over my flesh and bones, and who lives behind the fury of the sun, beneath the foam of the waves, and within the seed of the seed." And I used that quite a bit with my connections with hell. And there's a lot of different things like this, which in the end I realised I had so many of these devotional words that I wanted to go through and actually sort of take them all out and put them in a place together, which I then went on to do. There are lots more sort of prayers here that I just randomly grabbed my book of mirrors and wrote down. Guide me in the integration of light and shadow, help me to witness and worship the dark goddess within, assist me in my work, give me the discipline, focus and commitment to deliver my personal wisdom. Yeah, there's loads of little sort of like prayers and devotional words here. I did a lot of altar cleansing and altar protection and stuff when I first got my big altar that I have now. I don't do that at all anymore, really. Every so often, like when I change things on it to a significant degree, I will go ahead and do some protection over it and consecrate the whole thing. But back in the early days, it was obviously very important to me. But you know what? I'd never had such a big luxurious altar to work with. So it's probably also quite just a decadent, enjoyable thing to be able to just be there and witness the majesty of having this big altar. In this entry, I'm writing about the 2 moon phases that mean the most to me, which at the time were the full moon and the dark moon. And I've written here, full moon, gratitude, healing, giving, nurturing, sending good vibes, creativity, communion with the goddess in all forms. And then dark moon, I've put release, surrender and acceptance, calling all power back to myself, honouring my strength, communion with dark goddess, setting intentions and receiving guidance. I would say that actually now, a lot of the time, the half moon is more significant to me in some ways than the dark moon. Because I started to associate the half moon with hell, you know, half skeleton, half fleshly woman. So that started to make more sense to me. And I did start to recognise like there's really something about the energies of the half moon that can be really significant too. I'm just very lunar as a rule anyway, you know, I think a lot of witches are. I get so much from connecting with the moon. I was going through a big stage here of doing a lot of practice with the runes again and learning the runes. So it's interesting to see how that came back in when my relationship with hell really deepened. This is an interesting entry where I'm upset. I am pissed off with myself because I'm not being consistent with practice at all. I am questioning whether or not I actually really mean it. So obviously I think that's come from also the pressure of leveling up with having a bigger altar, obviously having more experiences that are goddess oriented and that meaning a lot to me. And then maybe I went through a slump. I obviously wasn't doing very much and I am really frustrated with myself in this entry. I'm saying that I haven't been communing with hell. I said here, I hate that I have these wondrous glimpses and then they ebb away again. I know that I mean it right now in this moment. I know that it matters right now, but I can't explain why it continues to be lost on me. Why do I keep reverting back to passivity? So basically what I'm saying is, when I'm here right now at my altar writing in my book of mirrors and it feels right at the moment, but why is it that I know already that I'm going to spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks then not doing anything at all? And I've had that situation quite a few times in my practice, and I'm sure a lot of you watching can relate, where at the time when I was at the altar and I was doing the thing, I was thinking to myself, why do I struggle to do this every day? It's obviously so good for me. It's so nurturing. Why do I have an issue with coming to practice as regularly as I want to and obviously would benefit from? And it's very frustrating. I was definitely trying to understand where my resistance was coming from in this entry a lot. Oh, there's guilt as well. There's guilt about missing a dark moon. And see, I think I'm being too hard on myself here with this. It's a little bit of both. It's like, I'm obviously frustrated with myself in this entry because I know what's good for me and I'm not doing it. But also, I'm getting guilty about missing individual things I plan to do. And, you know, that's not helpful. That's not going anywhere good. And then I do this thing at the end of this entry that I do a lot with myself, to be honest. And it's basically, I've ranted and vented about how I'm not engaged enough, I'm not doing the work, I'm not being dedicated. And then instead of just letting myself have that rant and let that be the end of it, I actually write a list of all the shit that I'm going to commit to do from that point on. And that's very frustrating for me about myself sometimes. It's like, look, just have a rant about what you're unhappy with, what you're disappointed by. If you're upset with yourself, say you're upset with yourself. But why then go into this fine detail of, now I'm going to do this, and this? It's very, you know, it's not kind to myself, and it just puts more pressure on. I'm obviously coming from a point of feeling pressured or feeling low energy for my craft, and then it's literally like points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 of what I've got to do now. And I think I get a false empowerment from that, and I've noticed that as my craft has gone along, I get a false empowerment from venting about what I want to do better or what I'm disappointed in, and then straight away going into this, right, now I've got that out, this is what I'm going to do, this is how it's going to look, this is how it's going to go. And it's like, that's not the helpful thing to do. That's not the way to solve it. The way to solve it is just to let yourself have the vent, I think, and not plan anything necessarily. I'm feeling in a better mood in the next few entries. I'm working with my Journey of Love Oracle, and I'm connecting more with hell, so I'm in a better place. But that was definitely a hard entry to read. I've written here, building habits takes time and hard work. I know that I'm capable of commitment. I know that I'm capable of consistency, and I'm ready to make that happen. And I've got a little butterfly sticker there. So I'm obviously thinking about, you know, transformation and stuff. But I do think at the same time, you know, there are always bound to be times where you sort of fall off the witchy wagon a bit. This is really interesting because this is something that I actually have conversations with my clients about when we talk about witchy practice and stuff, and not driving a wedge between the magical and the mundane, but seeing everything as all part of it. I've written here, I've realised that I've been driving a constant wedge between my spiritual practices and my actual life. My life is the mythology from which I ought to learn. My life is the thing I should bring to the altar. My plans for my business, my friendships, my health, etc. should be brought to the altar. To burn, to fuse together, to take sacred shape. I keep convincing myself that there's some significant difference between my journal and my Book of Mirrors, some difference between real life and the mythopoetic path of life. There just isn't. It's all the same. I need to be able to use the moon phases as markers for what I'm learning and taking on in my reality. I need to cement my intentions with ritual and spells, my intentions for mundane life, not just witchy life and studies. So yeah, here I'm saying to myself that everything can be a part of it, and I can use witchcraft for anything in my life. And I'm not making that separation anymore between what's witchy and what's spiritual and then what's like the mundane shit, you know? God, I'm really going on a lot in this book about how I want consistency and I want to be more disciplined. There is a frustration for sure, when I find myself doing anything. I'm not even just talking about the witchy journey now, but anything where I know it's good for me, and when I do it, I feel so good. So why don't I just keep doing it? You know? But that's a very common thing. And I think that there are forms of resistance that are rooted in the long distant past or rooted in difficult experiences that one has had. And there's also just the sense that, like, look, you've got to grow up. No one's going to crack the whip and tell you to do this thing that's good for you. You just have to fucking do this thing that's good for you. And it's just about being realistic and actually, you know, recognizing that sometimes resistance just comes from pure laziness of just wanting to keep scrolling on your phone or have another 20 minutes in bed. But you have to recognize that in the bigger picture, you already have the evidence that if you spent some time at the altar, you'd have a better day. You know that, so take responsibility for the fact that you have that knowledge, kind of thing. Here I'm getting upset about a lot of things that are going on in the world. I start by writing about Standing Rock and then it goes on from there, but you know, it's a frustration that what I can do is not enough to stop all of the madness and badness. And I think most witches' books of mirrors is going to have at least one entry like that at some point. I have hugely enjoyed going through these books with you guys, and I hope that it was interesting for you. It was very all over the place. Lots of different things got mentioned. Please let me know down in the comments if there's anything particularly that I said that you resonated with or that you agree with or that's happened for you in your practice. I would love to know. It's been very interesting to go down witchy memory lane, and thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Mwah. Blessed be, darlings.